All right, Rabosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of El Haba Aleinu Latova. Baruch Meir Rina Dubin, in honor of our children and all of the suburban sons and daughters beginning their year of study in Eretz Yisrael. May their Torah study and mitzvos in the Holy Land merit the release of our precious hostages, the success of our soldiers, and their return to their families, and the arrival of Mashiach Sidkinu B'mheira B'yameinu. Amen. So with that, let us begin. We have a ridiculously amazing journey ahead of us today. Really incredible Gemara ahead of us today. A lot of Gemara ahead of us today. Today's daf is Ayin Gimel 73. Let's go. Mazel Tov on beginning the new parish. To be able to begin Hamocher Es Hasfina and the next couple of days. Baruch Hashem, incredible stuff. Hamocher Es Hasfina. So we'll say, so this parak actually begins by continuing on the same theme that we've been talking about up until now, which is when you sell something, halacha l'maisa, what is included in the sale? Except here, we're switching over to boats. Hamocher es hasfina. So one sells a boat. What's included in the boat? Machar es hatorah. So I'm going to translate these terms now, even though the Gemara doesn't translate them until later, but just for the purpose of making the Mishnah a little bit more manageable. So a person sells a boat. What's included in the boat? The Torah, the mast. Ve'es hanas, the sail. Ve'es ha'ugin. Ugin will translate right now as the anchor. Ves kolaman higin osa. And the truth is, anything necessary to go ahead and drive the boat. I don't know if that's the right word, drive a boat, but okay. Anything that's necessary to go ahead and manage and drive the boat is included in the sale. Avalo machar es havadim. You don't sell. What's not included is like the staff. In other words, let's say again the boat, right? The owner of the boat had a staff that helped him drive the boat. That staff is not included. Velo es hamartzufin. And not the martzufin. What are martzufin? So Rashi says over here, Rashi says, Laseis besochan ha'antiki tainu prakmatya shel hasfina. So boats that carried merchandise, they had bags. They had bags, ultimately to put the merchandise in. Those bags are not included. Okay, veloas antiki, or cargo. In other words, let's say again the boat had cargo, so the cargo is not included. However, but if let's say when I'm selling this boat, so there's always the Mishnah follows a paradigm. If I say, Reuven, I'm selling you the boat and everything that's in it, then what? All of these items are in fact included. Okay, beautiful. Says the Gemara. So now we're just going to define some of the terms that we already defined in the Mishnah. So Torah and Iskarius. So Torah is a mast. V'cheinu omer erez malvana lachu lasos Torah lecha. Nas. What's a nas? Idra. That is a sail. V'cheinu omer sheish barikma mitzrayim haya befarshecha lios lechalanas. Ugin. What are ugin? So we said ugin is an anchor. These are the anchors. Manhigin. What are manhigin? Amrabi Abba elu hameshutin. These are the oars. These are the oars. Shala. V'cheinu omer. Alona mi bashar also mishotech libai semahacha vayardo me'anayosem koltov semashot. Okay, so we'll say the Gemara is just pointing out psukim, which we're not really going to get into right now, but just psukim that help to highlight the definition of these words. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, good. So let's go back to Tanrabanam. The Gemara goes weiter. Tanrabanam. Hamocher es hasfina, macher es haskalya, ve'es habor hamayim shebesocha. When you sell a boat, you sell the iskala and the bar mayim. What's the iskala? So iskala, Rashman points out in the second white line in the bottom, is the plank. So this is how you disembark from the ship, right? In other words, you go, right, the ship comes up to the dock, you go ahead and you put out the plank, you walk from the boat onto the dock. So that iskala, that plank is included in the sale. Ve'es bor hamayim shebesocha. Bar mayim shebesocha means a boat had to have a cistern for fresh water. So that's also included in the sale of the boat. Okay, so Rabbi Nassan says, Hamocher es hasfina, macher es habitzis. If you sell a boat, included in the sale of the boat is the bitzis. Now what's the bitzis? So bitzis, Rashban points out, is very interesting. Is like a little sfina ktana shekoshen sfina gidola. So we'll say this was the little boat that they tied to the big boat, like the dinghy, or the rowboat, a little rowboat. Or as well say, remember again, Rashban points out, if you had a larger boat and that boat, right, needed a deep water dock, so you couldn't necessarily bring it. Obviously, you can't bring it into shallow water. So what would you do? And let's say the dock that you needed to get to was a shallow water dock. You'd anchor the boat a little bit out. You take the dinghy, all right? You take the rowboat, and you'd come in. That's called Rabbi So that's called the bitzis. So Simcha says the machas asvina, machas adugis. So Simcha says if you sell a boat, you include the dugis. Amar Rava, bitzis hainu dugis. By the way, same thing. Bitzis and dugis both mean the little rowboat, right? The little dinghy. Rabbi Nassan bavlo ahavi kari la butzis kidarmi inshi butzi asa demeshon. So Rabbi Nassan was Babylonian. So in Bavel they called the little boat a butzis. Sumchos the bar Eretz Yisrael karila dugis. Simchos who lived in Eretz Yisrael they called it a dugis. Kedichsiv v'acharischon besirus duga. Beautiful. So I'll say now, get ready. Now that we brought up the topic of boats, so the Gemara is going to tell a bunch of stories about the sea. Sea, boats, sea creatures, different things. Incredible. So I'll say, I want to give you the caveat, I want to give you or I should say disclaimer, that each of these stories, right, obviously, again, like anytime we encounter Agarata in the Gemara, there are tremendous and overwhelming and beautiful lessons included in these stories. They're not just for entertainment purposes, right? But they are really like this. Agarata is the way that Chazal went ahead and really conveyed deep and meaningful messages. So it's a long daf. We're not going to be able to delve into every single one of them, but this is one of these Gemaras where you fold down the page, and when you have a couple of extra minutes or over Shabbos, you come back, you look at it. So we'll do our best to Mirz Hashem we'll do our best in Meretz Hashem to go ahead and maximize the stories that we can, recognizing that unfortunately we'll have to leave some for the next cycle as well. Amar Rabba, Ishtayla Nechusiyama. So Rabbi said, the sailors, Nechusiyama means those who travel the sea. Those who travel the sea told me the following, Hai Gala Demit Balasina. So this is incredible. This wave which is so large that it has the ability to go ahead and capsize a boat, Mischazi Kitzutzisa Denura Chiyurta Beresha. Sometimes when you see the wave, the wave has like a white fire at its tip. Now, of course, what he's referring to over here is the cresting of the wave on top, that white foam, but it looks like a white fire on its top. So we'll say, so what do you want to do if you want to prevent this wave from capsizing your boat? You have to take a staff, and on the staff should be engraved the following. Number one, I will be what I will be, the name that Kadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself to Moshe Rabbeinu in the beginning of their relationship. Ka, the name Yud-Kei, and Hashem Tzivakos, Amen, Amen, Selah. If you take a staff that has these items engraved in it, and you hit it against the wave, V'nayich, the wave will rest and will not capsize the boat. So we'll say, what's the pshat? So remember again, in general, in the Gemara, whenever you see discussions about waves, right? So waves always represent the overwhelming circumstances of life. A boat is almost always a metaphor for the person. So the Gemara, perhaps the Gemara is describing over here is we all encounter circumstances in life which threaten to capsize our personalistic boat. We all encounter circumstances which seem just simply profoundly overwhelming, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get through it. So what's the answer? You take your staff engraved with the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meaning what I was saying? The anchor in life is Ruchnius. The anchor in life is a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo. If you have a relationship with Hashem, that will steady you in the face of the waves. Now again, it doesn't mean that there aren't times that your boat isn't capsized, but we'll see other agaritas in just a moment. But Lamai said that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's what you need to face the waves of life. Rabbi said this is so incredibly important. Learning Torah, davening, specifically davening, b'tzibor. These are not things that are just like nice. Not things that are nice. They're the anchors. And if you don't have them, when the waves come your way, you will be swept away. That is the way that it works. Masha'in kain. If you have these things, I learn Torah every single day. It's part of my life. I daven when I can, when at all possible, with a minyan every single day of my life. These are the anchors. These are the anchors. And if you have them, again, it doesn't mean you're unscathed, and it doesn't mean you're impenetrable, and it does mean that you have much more to stand up against the waves of life. Anchor yourself from being capsized. Incredible. Next story. Amar Rabba, Ishayi Nechusiyama. Yeah, we're not going to get through this. All right. So Rabbi said as follows. It's just so good. Rabbi said, the sea travelers told me the following. Ben gala la gala tlas mea parsi. Between one wave and another wave, is 100 parsos. Veruma de galat klasmei parsi, and the height of a wave itself could be 300 parsos. Zimna chad. So we'll say, brother, just so you should understand these stories of sea travel. So understand, like traveling the sea was like uncharted territory. I mean, it still is uncharted territory, but especially we'll see that on, right. We're seeing this now in Maseches Brachos and Amud Yomi. The concept of sea travel, first of all, in and of itself, was inherently dangerous. And again, when you were out on the open seas, so you were vulnerable to everything. Remember, when you feel vulnerable, everything is amplified, right? Think about this in just a moment, right? If you're walking outside at night, right, by yourself, and you hear the trees rustle, so what happens? You turn around, you get nervous. Not just in Baltimore. I'm just saying, you get nervous, right? Yeah, it's interesting that same rustling of the tree during the day probably wouldn't even get your attention. Why? Because at night I'm vulnerable, and when I'm vulnerable, everything is amplified. So it's also important to understand these stories on the high seas, these stories in the oceans. Everything is amplified, right? So the wave is 30 stories tall. It wasn't 30 stories tall. I mean, there could be waves like that also, but it's also possible that feeling of vulnerability being in the sea amplifies how big and how dangerous everything is around you. So the Gemara goes right there. So Rabbi said, these guys told me that the height of the seas, right? The one time, Havazina ba'archa. One time we were traveling, Vidalinan Gala ad Chazinan Bay Ma'arvasa de Kochava Zuta. So one time we were traveling by sea, and there was such a high wave that the wave lifted us up all the way until we saw a resting place of a small star. In other words, we were lifted up so high that literally kiviyachol, we were by the stars. The Havili Kimivzar Arboin Garyuye Bizarra de Chardala. And ultimately, again, that space was as large as the area where you would plant 40 sav mustard seeds. And ultimately, had the wave lifted us up any higher, we would have been burnt by the warmth, by the heat of the star. Listen to this. And we heard, as this was happening, right? So that was describing the massive waves. So this sailor said, and I heard one wave talking to its friend. So one wave said to his friend, hey, you're destroying everything. Are you leaving anything for me to destroy? In other words, so these large waves, so the second wave says to the first wave, you're destroying everything. Aren't you leaving anything for me to destroy? So the second wave, which can't see what's going on, is assuming that due to the largeness of the first wave must be destroying cities, must be destroying the earth. So the second wave says, I want in on the action. Are you leaving anything for me? So this is incredible. Amarle puk chazi. So the first wave says back to the second wave, you should go and see givurta demarich, the strength of your master, i.e., the strength of the Ribono Shel Olam. See the strength of the Ribono Shel Olam. He goes on, what happened? Malechuta chala v'lo avdi. Kadosh Baruch Hu commanded that ultimately, again, that there is a line, literally a line in the sand that we are not allowed to cross. Right? That's Kadosh Baruch Hu commanded the seas. There's a line in the sand that we are not allowed to cross. Shene'emar ha'osi lo tironu Hashem imipnei lo imipana lo sachilu asher samti chol gvul liyam chok olam v'lo ya'avrenu. So the pasuk says, Kadosh Baruch Hu says to the sea, I have made literally a line in the sand. Gvul liyam, the sand is the boundary to the sea, and the sea you are never permitted to go ahead and trespass. So I will say incredible. What's the Musar Haskell from here? So first of all, I will say two incredible lessons. Number one, just as the world has boundaries, one of the most important things we need to establish for ourselves are boundaries as well. The Ribono Shel Olam said that ultimately the sea, as vast and as great as it is, you can go up to here and no more. You can't come any further. In our own lives, it's incredibly important to identify what's my line in the sand. What are my boundaries? I'll allow myself to do certain things, not do other things. If you don't know what your boundaries are, chances are at some point in time you'll come to cross them. Lesson number two, I will say this is a tremendous Musar Haskell. There are destructive forces in this world, but it's important to also know that we have a Ribono Shel Olam who keeps those destructive forces in check. And no matter how much the destruction seems to be sweeping over us, and no matter how difficult our circumstances seem to be, the Ribono Shel Olam says, what are destructive waves? You stop here. you stop here. It doesn't mean that there's not destruction and devastation still, but it's important to always understand that the Ribono Shel Olam, the one who runs the world, ultimately Chol Gvul Asaliyam, he makes a boundary. No matter how overwhelming the waves may be, the Ribono Shel Olam will always find a way to keep them in check. Incredible. Amar Rabba, Lididi Chazili Hormin Bar Lilis. So this is an interesting, they're all interesting stories. So Rabbi Rav Huna says, I saw Hormuz. The Hagosian changed it to Hormuz Bar Lilis. Hormuz Bar Lilis is a shade. He's a shade. Lilis, according to the Gemara, is like the mother of all shadim. Right? So Rabbi said, I saw Hormuz Bar Lilis. Ki karoit akufya deshur de mechuza. I saw that one time he was running on the edge of the wall of mechuza. Okay. Now, interesting enough, right below the wall was a guy. Right, and the guy was riding on his animal. Actually, the Rashbam changes. Changes it over here to Susya, the Hagosian. He was riding on his horse, and the rider, right, Hormuz, couldn't catch up with the rider. Hormuz couldn't catch up with the rider. So Rabbi says, so by the way, what's the pshat with that? This goes back to what we spoke about a couple of days ago as well, which is this concept that we don't even realize the things that the Ribono Shel Olam saves us from day in and day out. See here, this guy in the horse was totally oblivious to what? Right on the wall. Who's on the wall? Hormuz. Now, the fact that Hormuz is running after this guy, it doesn't sound like it's to say Shalom Aleichem, right? Something is going on. And yet, again, the rider outrode Hormuz. Every single day, there are destructive forces which seek to visit harm upon us, and every single day, the Ribono Shel Olam the Ribono Shel Olam saves us, often in ways of which we are totally unaware. So also listen to this. One time Hormuz, sounds like Hormuz was like a shtickle show-off. So one time what he was doing is, they had arranged for him, he had two mules. And I will say, V'kaimon Amadeis, V'kaimon Atrei Gishri, Dirogog. And what happens? The two mules were ultimately were arranged on two bridges. The Shor Mihailahai, and Hormuz was jumping from one donkey to another donkey, Umihailahai, from one to the other. V'nokit Trei Mazgi de Chamra Biadei, and he had 2 glasses of wine. So 2 donkeys on 2 bridges. Hormuz is holding 2 glasses of wine, jumping from donkey to donkey. And what happens? Umorik mihailahai, and he was pouring from one glass to another, velo nitfa nitipusa la'ara, and not one drop of wine spilled. You want him like for that first dance at the chasana, right? In other words, so literally again, not one drop of wine spilled. So the Gemara says, now what happened? Va'osayom yalu shamayim yardu tahomos ava ad shamu be'malchusa. The Katlua. Word got out to the house of the king and they killed him. Now actually it's interesting, machlokes in the Rashbam over here, who killed Hormuz. So the first opinion in the Rashbam is the Shadim killed Hormuz. The Shadim operate under a general principle of secrecy. That's why, again, right, we saw in Maseches Brachas that where do you have to be most careful of Shadim? In a ruin, right? In a ruin, that Shadim generally do not operate out in the public, and again, they keep their power secret, they keep their dealings secret. So this guy Hormuz was breaking with the code of the Shadim, and therefore the Shadim have him killed. Others say the other opinion, the Rashbam, is that it was the Caesar who had him killed because the Caesar felt that he might be a threat. Now again, what this means that you could kill a shade, what kind of shade is this? Okay, I don't know. Whenever it comes to shade, and I say, we always know there's a certain element that is beyond our comprehension. Amar Rabba, l'didi chazili or zila bar yomei tahavi kahar tavor. Rabba said, I saw this Orzila. Now the Rashbam says, Re'aim ben yom echad da'osa yom nolad. So Rabba say, the Re'aim was this mystical animal. What exactly was the Re'aim? We don't have a clear definition. But Rabba said, I saw this Re'aim. I saw 1 day old Re'aim, and it was as large, as tall as Har Tavor. So again, a newborn Re'aim, massive. So the Gemara says, V'har Tavor kamahabi. How big is Har Tavor? Arba Parsi. ultimately it's 4 parsos. Umashchad tzavari tlasa parse, and the place, the length of its neck is 3 parsos. Ubei marvaasa deresha parso palga, and the place where it rests its head is about 1.5 parsos. Rama kufsa b'sachar liardena. Ultimately, again, and when it relieves itself in such volume that literally it stops up the Jordan River. Incredible. So if you have one, you want to get that house broken as quickly as possible. Right, so I'll say, so the Gemara goes weiter. Amra barachana lididi chaziliyahu akurkasa. So Rabbi said like this: I saw a frog. This is fascinating. I saw a frog. So chaziliyahu akurkasa dahavi ki akra dehagrunya v'aksa dehakra kagrunya. That was as large. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. So he says, Akru kasat tzvardeya, ka'akra da'agrunya, gadol haya ka'osa krak. It was as large as the city of Hagrunya. So again, I will say, by the way, what's going on with all of these Gemaras, where Rabbi Baruch Hana is describing these natural things? I will say, what Rabbi Baruch Hana, I think, is trying, first of all, it's possible that it obviously could be taken literally, but it also could be that he's describing for us the vastness of the natural world, right? And that ultimately, again, the Ribono Shel Olam, we spoke about this before, that I don't remember what context it was, but the Rambam discusses the idea, this might have been in Amud Yomi, that the Rambam discusses the idea that if you want to fall in love, take a step back. Our goal in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to fall in love with the Ribono Shel Olam. That's the goal. It's not to have a platonic relationship with God. It's not to be friends with God. It's not to be close with God. It is to fall in love with the Ribono Shel Olam. How do you fall in love with the Ribono Shel Olam? The Rambam writes in Luchos Deos, through nature. Through nature, see the wonders of nature, and you will come to fall in love with the Ribono Shel Olam. So I'll say, so it could be that what Rabbi Baruch Hana is saying over here is, he's talking about just the vastness of nature, the overwhelming nature of nature, that you see these things that are so massive, that are so strong, that are so big, and these are the creations of the Ribono Shel Olam. Alachas kama v'kama the Ribono Shel Olam himself. So let's go weiter. So I saw this big frog. And this frog was as large as the city of Hagronya. The Akra de Hagronya Kamahabya. How big was Hagronya? We'll say first wide line, Ein Gilno days. Shisin Bati. It was 60 houses large. Okay? Asa Tanina. So we'll say, we're ready for this. Asa Tanina Bala. Then a serpent came along and swallowed up the frog. Vyasa Pushkansa Ubal Tanina. And so it's like Chagadya, right? And then a female raven, came and swallowed up the serpent. V'salik Yosef Be'ilana, and now go ahead and sat on a tree. Ta chazi kama nafish chela dilana. And we'll say, what was the takeaway from this? Look how strong that tree is. It's interesting takeaway, right? In other words, that here, so you had the frog was swallowed up by the serpent, the raven swallowed up the serpent, which swallowed up the frog, the raven sat on the tree, the branch didn't break. See how strong the tree is. So I'll say, what's the pshat? So perhaps once again, the tree, Eitz Chaim Hila Machazikim Ba. The tree always represents Torah. The tree always represents Ruchnius. Or the tree could also represent Adam. Kia Adam Eitz HaSadeh. This week's parasha. Kia Adam Eitz HaSadeh. But again, the reason why the tree represents man, ultimately, again, is because the tree represents Torah. Because our job in life is to become one with Torah. Once again, if you have the tree in your life, the tree could help you support anything. All of these things, the frog, the serpent, the raven, just like Chagadya, right, where everything represents one of our enemies, one of the stages of our enemies. This one swallowing up this one swallowing up this one. So how do we stay? How do you live in a world where everyone's trying to swallow you up? And how do you live in a world where everyone wants your destruction? And how do we live in a world where it's altercation and war and difficulty and trials and tribulations constantly, one into the other over thousands of years? How do you do it? The good news is the tree has the strongest branches. Eitz Chaim Hi Lamachazikim Ba. The tree is strong. The branches don't break. So as long as I go ahead and I become that Adam Eitz HaSadeh, I become that tree. I become the Eitz Chaim Hi Lamachazikim Ba. I make myself one with Torah. I embed my life in Torah. That Torah is not simply something that I learn for whatever amount of time during the day, but Torah is something that I strive to become. Nothing in this world will break me. Because nothing is stronger than the branches of a Yid. Nothing is stronger than the branches of Torah. Incredible. Amra Papa, Bashmuel. Ilo Havi Hasam Lo Hadmi. So Rabbi Shmuel says, by the way, it's almost like there's like independent corroboration. By the way, like Rabbi was like, I saw this myself, and had I not been there, I would not have believed it either. Incredible. But say these stories are just incredible. Listen to this. Rabbi Shmuel says, "Zim nechada, hava kazlin besfinta, v'chazinan hahu kura." So Rabbi Shmuel says, one time we were on a boat and we saw a fish. Now, what happened? And a small, it sounds like a parasite, a small parasite got lodged in the nostril of this large fish. So what happened? The large fish, which was inhabited by the parasite, died, and ultimately it washed up on shore. And when it washed up on shore, this fish was so large that it destroyed 60 cities. Just by washing up on shore, it destroyed 60 cities. And there was so much, remember again, fish don't need shechita, right? Fish don't need shechita, right? And again, it could very well be also, these are non-Jewish cities also, so whatever it is, the point is there was enough meat on the fish to feed 60 cities. And after 60 cities ate from it, there was enough still flesh left over to salt more of it for another 60 cities. So again, obviously, whenever you see 60, 60, 60, so again, it's hyperbolic, but the point that we're making over here is just the sheer size of this sea creature. And from one eyeball of this fish, they filled up 100 barrels of oil. And Rabbi Achana says, after we saw this, we came back a year later. We saw that they took the bones of the fish, they were sawing the bones in order to create structures. Okay, so once again, Abba say, what's the point of this? Marabu ma'asecha Hashem. We think we see the totality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creation just kind of by like looking around, and we're on. Where was it? Just the other night. I'm trying to think where it was. Just the other night. It might have been not last night, Wednesday night. It was such a clear night. And if anyone saw it, and the stars were just absolutely magnificent. You look at the sky on a clear light in a place where there's not that much artificial lighting, and it's beyond comprehension. That's just the stars. Rabbi Achana is describing the fish. The Rebbeinu Shalom created a world that is filled with overwhelming creation, and when we're able to see it and we're able to appreciate it, that leads us to a greater love and appreciation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Weiter. On Rabbi Achana, Zimnin Chada. I will say ridiculous story over here. Ridiculous. Zimnin Chada. Ridiculous. Zimnin Chada. Havaka Azlina Besinta. One time Rabbi Achana said we were traveling by boat. V'chazinan hahu kura. Diyas v'leichol sahagabe. We saw a fish that was so large. So what says, just you can understand the image over here. Rabbi Achana is on a boat. He's on a boat. So what happens? So there was this fish, and the back of the fish was out of the water, right? And the fish was so big, there was sand on top of the back of the fish. And what happens? And a field actually started to grow on the back of the fish. In other words, the back of the fish was so large and was out of the water for enough time that literally, again, grass was growing, vegetation was growing. Mamish looked like a field. So what happened? So Rabbi Bar Chana and his chevra thought Sarvira Yabeshtehi. They thought it was land. They're like, great, like we found a little remote island. We discovered a new island, a new right destination, a vacation spot. They were all excited. They found their island. So I will say, so what do Jews do when they find a remote spot? The first thing is, we barbecue, right? So in other words, so what do? You cook, you got to have lunch. So what do? So Rabbi Achana says, we started making dinner, right? We went ahead and we took out the grill, right? We started grilling. So what happened? Obviously the fish didn't like this. V'kadcham gabe is hapich. So obviously, so literally they did not realize it was a fish. They thought it was like an island, like a reef or like a barrier island somewhere. So they started cooking. The fish got hot, and what happened? The fish turned over. Fish turned over. Ve'ilav dahava mekarva sefinta hava tavinan. And were it not for the fact that our boat was nearby, we would have drowned. So we'll say, what's the idea over here? Once again, I think there's a running theme in these stories. A lot of times in life, we set ourselves up in certain circumstances. And I will say, the way it works in life is your circumstances could turn over in a moment. Right? There are certain things in life that give us security. Money gives us security. Right? Possessions give us security. And understandably so, it's not a bad thing. As long as we're acutely aware that whatever security they do afford us could change literally in a moment. You're on the back of the fish, riding high on the back of the fish. It's great. Sun tanning, barbecuing. Life is absolutely fantastic. You have everything you need. And then the way life works is in the next moment, everything turns over. Everything turns over. I will say, if you don't have a boat to steady you, then, and again, the boat, once again, the boat being a reference to Adam a reference to Eitz a reference to Eitz Chaim Hila Machazikim Ba, to spirituality. If I don't have an anchored boat nearby, if I don't have a strong personality and a strong lifestyle embedded in Torah, when that fish turns over, I'm going to be drowning. And see, people often make the mistake of thinking that they establish strong spiritual identities in times of crisis. It's a tremendous misnomer. Generally, the way people work is in times of crisis, you're using all of your energy to just stay afloat. Generally, people don't have time for God in times of crisis. They're trying to survive. The time to create a strong, beautiful, vibrant spiritual identity is when things are quote-unquote calm. They're never totally calm, but when they are calmer, that's the time. That's the time to focus more on my Torah. That's the time to focus more on my tefillah. That's the time to be a bigger Baal Tzedakah, to be a bigger Baal Chesed. Not in times of crisis, in times when it's calm. In times when it's quiet. That's how you establish your boat. That's how you bolster your tree, so that when the fish turns over, which it will, so that when the wave capsizes the boat, which inevitably happens for all of us, you've got something to hold on to. You've got something to keep you afloat. You've got something to steady you. If you don't have the boat, if you don't have the strong branches of the tree, then Rahman al-Islam, when the waves come and the boat overturns, which again I both say, it happens to all of us. It happens to all of us. A person, chas v'shalom, could be left with nothing to keep them afloat. Incredible. Let's go right. Another story. Hava azlina besfinta, v'sagai sinta bein shitza l'shitza dekura. So tlasa Yomi, utlasa elusa. So we'll see an interesting story. Rabbi Shmuel says, one time we were traveling by boat and we came across a very large fish, and literally it took us 3 days to travel in the boat between one fin and the other fin of the fish. You hear this what I'm saying? The fish was so big that it took us 3 days and 3 nights to travel in our boat to literally again get across from one fin to the other fin. So the Gemara says, what happens? Furthermore, again, we were traveling with the current and the fish was traveling against the current. So in other words, we were traveling faster than the fish. Well, maybe you'll say, maybe Rabbi Arachana was in a boat that was traveling very slowly. No, the boat was traveling so fast that in the amount of time that it took to heat up a pot of water, we had already traveled 60 parsos. Now that's fast. That's fast. And that's definitely hyperbolic, right? But the point over here is they were in whatever the Talmudic equivalent of a speedboat was. I don't know, 10 guys with oars, whatever, so whatever it was. So they were traveling quickly. Vishadi parsha gira kadmalei. And we were traveling so fast that if someone shot an arrow, our boat would outrun the arrow. So the point that Rabbi Rachana is making is we were traveling fast. Rabbi Rachana, zimnachada, I'm sorry, did I skip a line? Ravashi said, Hahu Gildana Diyamahavi Deisle Cheshiti. Ravashi is, by the way, the name of that fish is Gildana Diyama. It's the Gildana fish. Because everyone knows the Gildana fish has 2 fins that are very far apart. Incredible. Rabbi Rachana said as follows: Zimnachada Hava Azlina Besfinta, V'chazina Hud Sifra Dekoim ad katsuli b'maya v'reisha berakia. Jose is incredible, incredible. So Rabbi Chana said one time we were traveling, and we were traveling in a boat, and we saw a bird, a very large bird, that was in the water up until its ankles. So standing the ankles up until its standing in the water up until its ankles, but its head extended all the way into the heavens. Right, so there was this bird. So the Gemara says, "Varminon leka maya ubaina lachos lakuri nafshin." So they figured this is great. They figured, okay, we can disembark here. This is shallow water. Swim a little bit, relax a little bit, refresh ourselves a little bit, because they figured if the water is only up to the ankles of the bird, then it must be totally fine. So the Gemara said, "V'nafak baskal v'amran. A baskal came out and said, Lo techisu hacha. Do not disembark here. Do not get into the water here. Why? Dinaflas lechatzitza lebar nagra hashav shani v'lo kamatsha aara. Because 7 years ago, a guy dropped an axe, and the axe still hasn't come to rest on the seabed. In other words, say, what looked so incredibly shallow was in fact not. In other words, this was one large bird, right? So therefore, again, apparently the ankles of the bird were still very high up. So again, they were about to get off and swim. Baskol comes up and says the water is much deeper than you think. Somebody dropped an axe. It's still been swirling around for 7 years. So the Gemara says, by the way, it's not because actually that the water was so deep. It's because the water was very turbulent. The water was so in other words, there was a lot of currents in the water. So the currents kept the axe from going ahead and coming to rest. I was saying incredible. So much in that story as well. But let's finish the Gemara. Amar Rav Ashi, hahu ziz shadai du dichsiv. Hahu ziz shadai hu dichsiv v'ziz shadai imadi. So Rav Ashi says, by the way, the name of that bird is the ziz shadai. Okay, that's the name of that bird. Rabbi Chana says as follows. Zimna chada havaka azla b'midbara. Shabbos said, this is a really interesting story over here. One time I was walking in the desert, and what happens? Shabbos said, now we've transitioned. Now we're not finished with the sea. Don't worry, there's still more sea stories. We're just taking a break from the ocean a little bit and now going into the desert. One time I was traveling in the desert, and I saw these geese that were so fat. They were so fat that their feathers fell out because of their oil. In other words, they were so fat, there was so much oil coming out of these geese that their feathers would literally just fall out because of the moisture. Vekanagdi nachli demishcha mitusayu. And I saw that literally again, there were rivers of oil coming out of these geese. Take a look, by the way. Right, the Rashbam says over here, last couple of lines, last 3 lines. Disham tigat fayu, no flows, no shalam merov shuman. Their feathers fell out because of all the oil. So what happens? The Gemara says fine. The chazin hano, good. The kanad dinach dimishcham mitzay. Amina lahu is lon begavayu chalkala amad asi. So what happened? I said to these geese. Rabbi Chana says, I said to these geese, you have a portion in the world to come. You have a portion in the world to come. So the Gemara so what's happening over here is Rabbi Chana felt, he saw these animals, and he felt that these geese were like so, I don't know what the right word is, like succulent. You know, they looked so delicious. That he's like, this is not a maichal, this is not a food of olam haza, this must be a food of olam haba. Must be a food of olam haba. So he said to the geese, are you set aside for olam haba? So what happens? The Gemara says, so one of the geese lifted up its wing, as if to show its wing. This wing is reserved for the tzaddikim in Olam Haba. Look at Rashbam. So Rashbam understands that the goose was actually talking to Rabbi Chana. He said, Rabbi Chana, this wing, right, this fliegel over here, that's yours. That's yours in Olam Haba. The Gemara says, one raised its thigh. Ultimately, to say this is your portion of the world to come. When I came up for Rabbi Lazar, Amrli, Asidin Yisrael Litain Alein Es Hadin. Shabbos said, this is incredible. So he said one time. So I came to Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar said, ultimately, Klal Yisrael is going to have to stand judgment ultimately for these geese. Now, what is that mean? Klal Yisrael have to stand judgment for the geese. Take a look at Rashbam. Litan Sadin shebechatasam misakev Mashiach. I will say this is incredible. So understandably, what's unfolding over here? What's unfolding over here is that these geese were obviously set aside for some type of celebratory seudah in the times of Mashiach. So what's happening? So the geese are getting fatter and fatter because they're just sitting around and waiting. So the oil is oozing out. The feathers are falling out. So all this kind of stuff. So Rabbi Bar Chana is like amazed by this. He's amazed by this scene, right? He can't, he's totally overwhelmed by what it is that he's seeing. He goes to Rabbi Lazar. Who did he go to? I'm sorry. Rabbi Lazar. So he goes to Rabbi Lazar. Yeah. I'm sorry, why did I just lose the place here? I'm sorry. Yeah, he goes to Rabbi Lazar, sorry. He goes to Rabbi Lazar, and Rabbi Lazar says, you have to understand, what you saw is amazing, but understand that these geese are suffering. Right? Why are they suffering? Because they're obviously waiting here for Mashiach, and they're just getting fatter and oilier, right? And again, it's clearly, I guess, it sounds pretty uncomfortable, right? So, and they're just waiting. So, Rabbi Lazar says, those who are responsible for the delay of Mashiach ultimately, again, will be held responsible for the suffering of these geese. So we'll say, so just understand what's unfolding over here. Take a look now. Take a look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam says, Litain Alei Mesadim. The Rashbam says, Shebechatasam misakev Mashiach. As a result of our averos. Now we'll say, who is he talking about? He's talking about us, talking about people. As a result of our averos, misakev Mashiach. We delay the arrival of Mashiach. V'yesh lahen sar ba'alei chayim la'osan avzim machmas shumnan. And I will say, therefore, again, we cause the sar ba'alei chayim, we cause the suffering to these geese as a result of the delay of Mashiach because of our averos. So I will say, this is a mind-blowing Gemara. Why? So I will say, we often think about Mashiach. When it comes to Mashiach, it's fascinating. It comes to Mashiach, so the way our minds often think about Mashiach is, the Messianic conversation kind of goes like this: Ribono Shalom, why are you delaying in bringing the Mashiach? Almost as if the delay is all about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meanwhile, what is the Gemara highlighting to us? The Gemara is highlighting is, we also have a role in the delay. We have a role in the delay, and essentially every single time I commit an Aveira, I'm also delaying the arrival of Mashiach. So now again, could HaKadosh Baruch Hu do anything? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu see that the suffering of Klal Yisrael comes to a point where it's just enough. Upon him. Do we understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could pull that lever? Of course he can. Of course he can. But it's also important to understand, in any conflict or in any problem, it's important to understand what my role in it is as well. And when I commit averos, and when I refuse to make lifestyle changes, or I refuse to modify certain things about myself and about my life, it's important to understand, I'm not only affecting me, but I too have, unfortunately, a role in delaying the arrival of Mashiach, which I will say is an overwhelmingly difficult pill to swallow, because I would much rather put the delay of Mashiach on the shoulders of the Ribono Shel Olam and say that it's not about me, but it is. But it is. There's a joint issue. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for whatever reason, is not bringing the Mashiach, and I'm not helping the situation. But the converse is true as well. If my averos ultimately delay the arrival of Mashiach, then what does that mean? Then my mitzvos, by definition, must hasten it as well. And I will say, it should embolden us to recognize that we have the power. We have the power to bring Mashiach, right? If all of us, and all these things go together. If all of us were to go ahead and strengthen our trees, if all of us were to go ahead and strengthen our boats, if all of us were to redouble our efforts, not even redouble our efforts, but just put in a little bit more effort to focus on bolstering and growing and amplifying our ruchnius, there is no telling what our collective efforts could create. We think that sometimes we're powerless in a messianic narrative, but we're not. We're not. If we're held culpable for delaying the arrival, in other words, you can't be held culpable for something you don't control. So if there's culpability for the delay in the arrival of Mashiach, if I'm responsible. So great. By the way, great. Now another feeling of guilt. Now I have more collective Jewish guilt, right? So not only am I responsible for my fellow Jew, but now suddenly again I have responsibility for 2 fat geese somewhere that are suffering in their oil because of Tsar Bali Chaim, because I'm committing Averis. Not the most good feeling Gemara, but Lamaisa again, if I bear the responsibility for the Tsar Bali Chaim of the fat messianic geese, then Abba say that tells me I have the ability to affect change. That tells me that I have the ability to do something. That I have the ability to hasten the arrival of Mashiach. If I have the ability to delay it, I have the ability to hasten. I will say, what an incredible oros. Let's go weiter. One time I was going ahead and traveling in the desert. I was traveling with an Arab. Rashi says over here, Socha Yishmael. And ultimately, everybody say, no, actually, we're going to do is we're going to stop over here. We'll have a couple of minutes to get ready for davening. But who was it that said we were going to finish the daf? I think there are people. All right. So stop over here for today. Hashem, give us a few minutes to get ready for davening. Go into Elul davening with a little bit more preparation. And so we'll say, tremendous shkoyach. We'll pick up Miras Hashem more tomorrow. Miras Hashem, we have tomorrow and Sunday. So really a little bit, tomorrow, Sunday, Miras Hashem. So incredible Gemaras ahead of us. Shkoyach.
Philosophical ideas, they're all action.
They're all action. Right, very true.
Like a tree whose roots are very strong.
Beautiful. Shkoyach. All right, I will say, have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone.